Coming up on the Pete Sousa podcast on the Rogue Media Sports Network. Try to punch that more and more. The Rogue Media Sports Network. It's important. And so is our first guest, Scott Williams. Played 15 years in the NBA. Played for North Carolina under Dean Smith. Played with Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, where he won 3 titles. He just wrote a book called Through the Fire, a memoir of trauma and loss, basketball and triumph. The guy he's got an amazing story, and he had an extremely difficult childhood. The book details the murder of his mother by his father, who then took his own life. Scott was at North Carolina at the time this all happened, and Dean Smith delivered the news to him on the first day of practice of his sophomore year. And he has made it through the fire, literally, and is helping others with that story. He's also an extremely funny, witty guy, and the book is awesome. It's well-written, and it doesn't take long to get through it all. I say well-written because I compare Scott to me, and I don't know that I could write a book that's good. I certainly couldn't. All right, and after that, Lindsay Schnell. Women's basketball is going crazy. I'm going crazy. I couldn't all day yesterday. I was waiting around for the LSU Iowa game, and it was must-see TV. And I can't remember being that excited for a game this season to watch. So I think we're all excited about women's basketball and where it's headed, and we're all headed to the Final Four now as fans. All right, so that's it. It's all coming up next on the Pete Sousa podcast. All right, Zach is here with us as we get set to start another show. Zach, did you watch the women's basketball game, Iowa and LSU?
I did watch the last 2 quarters.
The first 2 were the best.
I know. I saw that it was tied at halftime. I'm a busy man. I got busy things going. I followed it like on my phone. Like I was caught up in the pandemonium of the Iowa LSU rematch. So I followed it. But I wasn't able to like sit down and watch till the last 2 quarters.
What were you doing that you couldn't watch?
I'm just work around here. I'm a busy guy.
At the Rogue Media Network?
Yeah. I got to get stuff done.
What time do you get done around here?
It depends on the day. Yesterday was a fairly busy day, so we got out about, I don't know, like kind of 6-ish, 6:30-ish. Had to run, pick up some groceries on the way home. I'm a family man. I had things to do, but I followed and then I watched the last 2 quarters.
The game did start at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, a little early.
Which I was pumped, 6 o'clock Central Time. It lived up to the hype. I was disappointed because I wanted to see LSU win. For some reason, I feel a weird Waco attachment to Kim Mulkey, and I like when she does well because I think she's just such a character. And I'd grown very fond of Angel Reese. So they go home, but we still get Caitlin Clark. So it's a win-win, really. And I'm talking to this one strictly as a fan. I have no skin in the game other than I want to be excited to watch the games. I'm going to be excited to watch the Final Four. What has changed about women's basketball, Zach, that has made it so exciting for us?
See, I think in this instance, at least, it was, there's a lot of things. It's the multiple stars, I think, that people can kind of latch on to because it's not just Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese. It's, Paige Beckers in
Cordoza,
UConn. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different stars, it feels like, right now in at least the women's college game, but it doesn't seem like that's fair to women's college basketball because there's been other times where there have been other big names too. Maybe it's just like the perfect storm of all the storylines kind of coming together at once, and so it makes for must-see TV that way.
Yeah, well, Lindsay from USA Today, Lindsay Schnell, she's coming up, and she talks about her theory on why it's exploding now in the way it is. And it's a very good theory. So I want people to stick around and listen to that. We're drawn to characters. If you notice the way that the NBA operates now, it's a year-round business. And part of the reason it's a year-round business is because we have become accustomed to having these guys in our life. And so when a guy gets traded or a guy becomes a free agent, it's something we track in the offseason because now we have a vested interest in these guys. We get to know them through social media. They're more vulnerable than ever. And I think that's starting to happen with women's college basketball too. Like these people are now becoming our friends, our people. I'm going to spend, as far as I'm concerned, don't get worried, Caitlin Clark. I don't want this to be weird, but I'm going to spend the next 10 to 15 years with Caitlin Clark. She's now a part of my life. You know, like as a fan, I now have season tickets to Caitlin Clark. Angel Reese as well. Regardless of what happens to these folks, I am going to follow them.
Well, then what is it for you then? Because like I would assume that there have been other college basketball player, or, women's college basketball players that have at least garnered your interest to that same level in some instinct in all your,
Yeah. Well, there's a couple, there was a woman, a young girl played for, I think, Southwest Missouri State. Could be getting the name of the school wrong, but people know who she is. Jackie Stiles. She broke all kinds of records. She took this team to the Final Four on her back. She was amazing. This is probably 2000, 2001. Now, if Jackie Stiles was playing today, she would be all over everywhere. And I think what has changed is the accessibility of our ability to watch the games. I also think, so you could say what you want about social media being kind of, I don't think it's the best thing in the world, but it does give people a platform for us to get to know them. And I feel like a lot of these girls are super marketable and super likable, so we get to know them, we like them, and then we see they're making 40-foot shots with consistency. What else do you need? You got a colorful person who seems cool, who's passionate, who's burying threes off the dribble right over half court. I'm a simple guy.
Yeah.
You got me.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I believe that we're in more of a situation now where we have more of an opportunity to get to know these people, and sometimes that's not all bad.
No, I completely agree with that. I think that, finding more out about these people, it kind of gives you more to root for in a lot of instances, or more reasons to kind of hang on. Like, yeah, she is able to, drain it from this far out, like from right over, stepping right over half court. But also there's this about her personality that I like more. There's this, finding things about that. Like one of the things that I'm a big, when it comes to basketball, huge 90s basketball fan, right? Because I was everybody loved Jordan. I'm a Supersonics fan. So it was Glove and Kemp. Those are my guys, man. Like that's the best duo to me. And one of the things that I always kind of like admired about Gary Payton was his trash talk in a sense. I'm never that type of guy, but when somebody can do it so well and can control a game like that, like I'll always love that about him. But I can't remember which Jeff Pearlman book it is, but one of the scouts tells the story of going and seeing him when he's at Oregon State. And it's that he's there by himself and he's trash talking himself.
It's Three-Ring Circus.
Yeah, it is from the. And so like just that story and knowing like even him by himself, like that's GP through and through. Like the more you learn about that person, the more I'm like, yeah, he's always kind of been, so learning more about the players that you follow, I think just adds to it and adds to the fandom in a way, and just how much more you can kind of root for and appreciate these people.
Well, you mentioned you were a 90s basketball fan. I have a treat for you.
Yes, sir.
We're going to start this off with our conversation with Scott Williams. The book is Through the Fire. Scott is awesome. I had a chance to call a game with him this year for ESPN. I got to know him a little bit. We've kept in touch. You guys are going to love Scott if you don't already know him. I talked about him a little bit off the top. So let's get to him right now. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about North Carolina. I want to talk about, we won't go too deep on that, but obviously you're a guy to talk to about North Carolina, the family of North Carolina. I want to talk about the book, which, by the way, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass, dude. It's an awesome book. And
thank you.
So, like, who inspired? There it is. Who inspired? Like,
hey, not my first podcast.
Is this it?
Gotta try to move some of these books, Pete.
Yeah, no. If I said the book in there, I get you for sure. Either way, I knew you'd come, but I knew you'd come happily if we talked about the book.
Of course I would.
So, dude, it's an unbelievable book. Did you wrote it in how long?
Well,
it's called Through the Fire, by the way, because people listen to this on the audio. Through the Fire, a memoir of trauma and loss, basketball and triumph. Scott Williams and Ben Guest.
Right. Well, so Ben Guest is a writer. He's the real writer, and he was working on a a basketball book about his journeys of talking basketball over in Africa and wanted some help with that. And I said, well, I'll help you with your book if you help me write my story. And I wanted to get it out there because, as you'd mentioned, I went to the University of North Carolina, and during the pandemic, a lot of depression hit a lot of people hard, and 5 kids had unalived themselves on campus. And I remember being in those dormitory rooms after my father took my mother's life and then turned the gun on himself, being depressed, not to the point where I thought I really had actions of suicidal, but thoughts of not wanting to go on. And I thought if I wrote and shared my story about how I was in that same predicament, in that same place, in that same dormitory, on that same campus, and I had people that I could trust, open up to, like Coach Dean Smith, that helped me navigate those tough times and go and not give up on my goal of playing in the NBA and my promise to my mother of getting my college degree, then they could do it too.
Yeah, well, what you did was amazing. And the book, you mentioned the moment, you went there, so I'll follow you. It's 7:30 in the morning. Your roommate, it tells you that Coach Smith is at the door. And you had grown up in a family where there was abuse, and other people have too, but this was a significant amount of abuse at the hands of your father. And Coach Smith, the first thing he says to you, he says, well, he did it, which to me implies that you were already so close with Coach Smith in your sophomore year that he knew the circumstances surrounding your family. He had to be like a father to you.
Yeah, and my mother had, and obviously my brother and I, we lived through all the, not only physical abuse, but verbal abuse, tremendous amount of verbal abuse, which honestly, I believe is just, if not more damaging to a young person than the actual physical scars. And having written this book and talked to a lot of people that have opened up to me, some complete strangers that have opened up to me about the verbal abuse and how hard that was to overcome. And, my brother took way more of the verbal abuse. He was a Albert Williams Jr., and you can imagine that he could
Albert
never
is
do
your dad.
anything right, and right in my father's eyes. And he took way more of the verbal abuse than I did, and unfortunately has suffered greatly in his life, I'm sure, to this day.
You mentioned in the book alcohol and drugs, and that's something, I told you that I was sober for many years, and I think we connected on that because I could tell you have a window into actually how bad that can be.
Yeah, it really was, and it was a shame what happened to my brother because he was a great athlete, and he took a different direction as to more depression, retreating to that, where I went another way and said, F you, I'll show you how good I can be, and put my head down and probably worked a little bit more. To stay away from those types of things and to try to get that college scholarship and go on to try to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. But, my mother was probably closer to Coach Smith than any other coaches that recruited me because he invited her to come on my official visit to North Carolina. And she wanted me to go to North Carolina right away, even though I had a couple more official visits to take. So Coach Smith got more or less, got to me through my mom, but it was certainly a another arrow in his quiver there to get me to go to North Carolina because she fell in love with the school and fell in love with the man as well. So I believe that she had opened up to Coach Smith even more about what was going on with the family than I had ever done. So when he walked into my room that morning and gave me that news, which he writes about in his own book, the hardest thing he ever had to do in coaching.
Yeah, and you said, and I thought you put this so well, dude, like Coach Smith, like the guy, an amazing way with words over his life, over his career. And you said, what would he say? He did what people, he kind of held the space with you and just was there with you. And the number one thing that I appreciate him being such a wise man when you said, hey, I think I might want to take the year off. And he said no.
Yeah. It's difficult because, classes, I wasn't the best student anyway. I had to work extremely hard just to keep my grades up. And it was hard to concentrate. It's hard to concentrate and balance my class workload and then a Coach Dean Smith practice at the same period of time. I was exhausted physically and mentally for a long period of time before I could kind of re-get my footing. But the best thing about him telling me no, that he would not let me sit out 1 year, because I would have drifted away from the program, would have drifted away from my teammates, and then I would have been attending practices, may not have been traveling on the road with the team, would not have felt connected to being, in the trenches with them, in the wins and losses. And I know he just from having played pro ball after that, if you're on that injured list, you get disconnected from your group real quickly. So that was the best thing that helped me, because for those 2.5 hours or 3 hours in practice and weight training and film sessions and banging with my teammates and conditioning after practice, it got me to escape the realities of what I'd just gone through. It was a therapy session for me. Not always the best and easiest therapy session, but yet it certainly was good therapy. And I owe a lot to Coach Smith for being there for me.
How hard was it for you to write this book, Scott?
Hard. And you read it. You read it probably 90 minutes or 2 hours.
And that's what, honestly, I love that about it. It's a quick read.
It's not a long book. I jump right into the meats of it. It's no fluff in there whatsoever. I talk right about from page one how I was embarrassed that I had suffered so much abuse. I was a bedwetter till I was at the age of 17, 18 years old, and you just share that. Now at I just turned 56. That I couldn't control myself in the evenings because for a long period of time I couldn't figure out why. And then as soon as I got away to North Carolina, no issues. As soon as I was out from underneath that roof in that house, I never had an issue again. So I guess the trauma of being around that sort of environment, and I know a lot of kids that suffer with that. It's tough to do, but it's tough to write about your personal experience. It's tough to write about, someone that you loved, and your mother was always there supportive of me. And my first love being baseball. She taught me how to catch and throw and hold a bat in a stance. That was my mom doing. It wasn't my brother, it wasn't my dad. That was my mom that did that in the backyard, with the German Shepherd running around, in the backyard. So it's tough to share those emotions. And it took me almost 2 years to write, 40 pages, 150 pages, because I'd had to put it down a lot. Digging up those old emotions and those memories and those feelings, especially during the holiday season. Who the hell wants to deal with that? And there was times when I thought, this is too much. I'm never publishing this. I may give it to my kids one day and maybe not even do that. But then I thought about those children. I said, maybe I can help one kid somewhere, North Carolina, wherever, college or high school, then it's worth it. And my mama didn't raise no punk ass, witches. So if I had to deal with a couple of Twitter trolls, so be it. I'm big enough and thick-skinned enough. I can handle that.
Yeah, you talked about when we were on the road in Utah doing that game and for ESPN, and you said many times you thought you weren't going to finish it, and then when you finished it, you said, "Well, I'm not going to have it published," and now here you are. You got to feel pretty strong about that. How looking back on the experience, are you better off for it?
100% yes. I write about that, and I've had a chance to kind of reconnect with MJ, Michael Jordan, since the book has come out. And right when it came out, I sent him a copy and a letter. One of the things that I write about there, when he lost his father to a murder after our third championship in '93, I was so triggered. I didn't have the, guts to reach out and talk to him about what it's like to have a parent murdered. And it was something to this day I regret. So when he did contact me, I asked him if he'd gotten my letter and had a chance to read my book. And he said he'd gotten the book, but he hadn't had a chance to read it yet. But I asked him to do that and to kind of get back to me. I'm hoping to get some exposure because from the book, because I want it to be able to help somebody. And I know that it already has. Maybe not from a young adult's perspective, but people our age that have read the book and tell me that they lived a similar horror and that they had a tough time reading the book. They were triggered. They had to put it down. But they shared all this stuff with me. And people I don't know, like just found me on Instagram and sent me a DM or on Facebook and shared something with me on Messenger. And I think that in itself is worth it to help people have to try to cope.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you helped me just reading that first sequence you talk about with, you woke up one night and there was your dad who was abusive, and he was standing in your room, and you put pots and pans from that point from that point forward by your front door, so you could hear him. I mean, that I didn't have to. My dad, we got whacked around a little bit, but there was nothing like that. Like nothing like that, where it gives somebody like me an appreciation into that type of window. I grew up in alcoholism and all that stuff, so I know what that's like, but I don't know exactly what that experience is like. So you've already sort of helped me. Part of the book is a celebration of your accomplishments and your experiences and your life. Okay, first of all, I'm gonna read some names off for you. All right, you ready for this? Hang on. Yeah. I printed this out. Okay. Do you know what? And I'm just gonna read a couple guys' names off. All right. Let's see here. Gerald Glass, Nigel Knight, Walter Palmer. Let me see who else here.
I know. I'm
Stephen
pretty sure
Bardo.
I know what list this. I think I know what list this is.
You know what these guys have in common? You want to tell me?
I believe they were all drafted in the 1990 NBA draft.
And you know who was not, ladies and gentlemen? Scott Williams. Okay, so here's another exercise I did. You ready for this one? There are 5 guys that were drafted in those 2 rounds in 1990 who played more games than Scott Williams. They were Derek Coleman, Gary Payton, Kendall Gill, Tony Kukoc, your former teammate, and Bo Coles. I mean, so I need you to walk me through a little bit of first of all, you had a great career in North Carolina. You really did. And playing against the best of competition. You put up good numbers. You almost averaged a double-double, I think, your junior and senior year. What happened? How come? What was that like, that experience of not getting drafted?
Painful. Like you said, I had a solid career at North Carolina. Nothing like the greats Phil Ford did, Tyler Hansbrough, Michael Jordan, James Worthy, my idol. After Dr. J, and my second.
The picture of your mom with Worthy is amazing, by the way.
Yeah. That was taken in the stands at UCLA when we were out there. My rookie. Freshman year.
Wow. Okay.
I in junior high and high school, I patterned my game after James Worthy. Came up a little short of that, but what the hell? Shoot for the stars, right?
Dude, you played 15 years in the league.
I had a good career.
There's no question about that.
Career at North Carolina, but my biggest issue was I had a right shoulder that would sublux and dislocate at periods of time during games. Now, I never missed a practice or a game because of it. I sometimes had to sub out of the game. Like anybody would sub out of a game, normal rotation. I went back in. I never left a game, never to return from the injury. So I even though it was painful, never thought it was going to be an issue to stop me from being drafted. But general managers and I guess medical staffs in the NBA did not see it that way. So I was passed over by all those names and more that you read off on draft night. And I wrote down every name. This is kind of before the internet took off. I had to literally pull out a pad of paper and a pen and write down all these damn names I got drafted in front of me. And I knew that I was better than a lot of those cats on that list. And I made a promise to myself that I'm going to play longer than everybody on this list. Now, you read off games played. I haven't heard that version of it that way, but from the start of the training camp to the time that I retired in 2005, there was only one cat that was still playing start to finish in the NBA. So
who was that? Gary Payton?
our only Hall of Famer from that draft class, Gary Payton, was still going. Now he's going strong, but he was still going, and I was completely out of gas. I was with a 19-year-old LeBron James and an 18-year-old Anderson Varejao in Cleveland, and these dudes were just running laps around me. So I knew I was officially done and could go no more. But I'm happy with my career. I got to win with one of the greatest players of all time, if not the greatest player of all time, in Michael Jordan. I write about that experience in the book, and finishing with LeBron James after having seen multiple Hall of Famers along the way, from Dirk Nowitzki to Steve Nash to Scottie Pippen, Tony Kukoc. I'm sure I'm Ray Allen. I'm probably forgetting a couple, but it was refreshing again to see a guy approach practice, film sessions, weight training, overall knowledge of the game, wanting to talk hoops on the plane the way LeBron did. There's no question I knew that he was going to be a great pro. I knew he was going to make all-star teams. I knew he'd probably make a all-NBAer. But shit, I didn't know he was going to go on and score 40,000 freaking points.
Well, and you said
the league's all-time leading scorer. So it's been pretty impressive for me for the last 20 years. You're
also a touchstone of knowledge, because when we were out in Utah for the Oklahoma State BYU game, Mike Boynton they had John Michael Wright talk to you, who's one of their star players, and you had to educate John Michael Wright on why just maybe MJ was better than LeBron. You played with both of them in the same time, and in your opinion, you said Michael was a little bit more of a killer.
100%. Yeah, LeBron's phenomenal, and I don't like when players or fans or whoever try to bash LeBron to make Michael better, or to bash Michael to make LeBron better, because the guys are both phenomenal, and things they have accomplished should never be bashed. But if I had wanted to put the ball in the hands of one dude and say, go win me a game, there's no doubt in my mind I'm going to put it in the hands of Michael Jordan, because that dude just refuses to lose. And he does it with not only just with, the expectations that he's going to deliver a victory, he surpasses the expectations on how he's going to deliver that victory like anybody I've ever seen before since.
Well, you mentioned, playing with MJ. He actually jump-started your career in a sense. You got to play with him for 3 years, right? And you win 3 championships. Yes. But how do you end up in Chicago, for people that don't know the story? It's amazing.
Happenstance, luck, I think, more than anything else, Pete, because after not getting drafted, after finishing my list, shortly after that, I'm in Chapel Hill, Jordan's in Greensboro for a camp for some underprivileged kids. He's brought a couple of his NBA buddies from Chicago. Some guys came up from Charlotte to basically play a pickup game. And they just divvy up the teams. And sure enough, I got a last-minute invitation to play in that game. And I'm thinking, hey, if I'm going to try to make it to the NBA, I got to try to get into this game to see how I stack up against pros. And Jordan put me on his squad, and I held my own. I wasn't the best player on the court for sure, but I wasn't getting pushed around by the physicality. And this wasn't no all-star game like you see today, 196 to 178. This was a war. In fact, there's going to be a documentary that comes out soon called The Greatest Pickup Game Ever, about the legend of these games. And Jordan told everybody before we took the court, if you're not here to play serious basketball, you can leave. And there's a bunch of guys who ain't getting paid. Like, I wasn't happy to be there, but these are pro guys. Bimbo Coles was there. Charles Oakley, Del Curry. Like, there's a lot of big name NBA guys from that area that played in this game. And thinking, is he serious? Right? Like, we ain't get paid for this. But that's the way MJ was about everything. So I got an offensive rebound late in the game with our team down 1, and I thought about throwing that little janky hook over my left shoulder, and I saw MJ over there on the right wing and said, I'm going to get a ball to him. Tongue comes out, bang, he knocks in. Basically, it's the game winner. And as he's leaving the arena, and I'll never forget, I didn't know this part back in the day. I found out much later here, but he gets on the phone. He was jumped in this red Corvette, and his buddy Fred Whitfield was with him. And Fred tells the story that he immediately calls Jerry Krause and told him to give me a tryout.
And so you get a tryout with the Bulls, and clearly
Summer League. It wasn't even the veterans camp yet. I had to go to Summer League, and that's when Summer League wasn't in Vegas. It was at Loyola Marymount. It wasn't even televised. And I'm telling you, I don't think there was 100 people in the stands back in the day. Maybe some friends and family, maybe about 125 all total. But I survived that round of cuts and get invited to veterans camp, where they got 7 guys trying out for one spot. Bulls only carried 12 people on the roster back then, 11 under guaranteed contracts. So 7 of us staying at this, I call it a motel, but it was it was like probably a Holiday Inn right off the highway. We'd all pile into this van for practice every day. And one day the van picked me up and nobody else came out of the hotel. So I was the only guy in the van. There was no press conference. There wasn't no congratulations by Phil Jackson and the coaching staff. I just put on my practice stuff and went out there and kept playing. I think, I'd just keep showing up till they told me to go home.
Hey, and 2 years later, I mean, obviously you have an impact your rookie year and your second year. It's worth mentioning the fourth quarter of the best comeback in NBA Finals at the time against the Trailblazers in a game-clinching series-clinching victory in the NBA Finals. You guys win your second title in your second year. You're on the court the whole time in the fourth quarter. I mean, so this is a guy who has come a long way.
I'm quite proud of that, Pete. Thank you for bringing that up, because it's not always where you start. It's how you motivate yourself, you stay hungry, and how you finish. I've never been in a basketball game where I was healthy to play and not play. And that happened to me quite often during my rookie year. I only played in 51 games. I was eligible to play in all of them. And that was a blow to my ego. So I went to work. The second half of the season, I had kind of learned the system really well, the triangle offense. Boy, I'll tell you, for a lot of people that don't know anything about that, it's a tough system to learn. It's unlike a lot of traditional basketball sets that you run. It's a lot of read and react, a lot of moving different pieces. Will Perdue, my former teammate and good buddy, he described it as a chessboard of like 64 different options that can happen for read and react after all the 10 players on the court. So I learned that system really, really well. In fact, Jim Clemens, one of the assistant coaches, said I was the quickest to pick up that system. And I think that helped me out, because Coach Smith practices, he didn't just roll out the balls to a bunch of All-Americans. He taught us the X's and O's, time and score, the intricacies of basketball. So it helped me really separate myself from some of the other guys trying out for that squad. But the second half of the season, I started playing against good teams. And by playoff times, I was, kind of one of the first two, Cliff Levinson and I were on the first 2 bigs off the bench against the Pistons, playing against the Portland Trailblazers and Duckworth and Buck Williams and Cliff Robinson. So when I found myself going into that game down 15 with my buddies, Stacey King, BJ Armstrong, Bobby Hansen, that's how we practiced. And they left Scottie Pippen out there because we had somebody to bring the damn ball up and handle the pressure. But for the most part, it was our group. We always played starters versus a sub, so we were real confident. Even I swear to this day, and Phil Jackson might fight me on this, but he had given up on that damn game.
You said that in the book, which I found super interesting.
For Game 7 in Chicago Stadium, and it wasn't what he said, but it was what he didn't say in his body language that I'll never forget. Was different than any other time I had ever seen him in the heat of fire. And I kind of looked at my buddies like, oh, no, hell no. We're going to go out there and ball, because we played against Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, right? Like
every day.
We played against good dudes every day. And we're used to competing. And that's what we're going to do. And Bobby Hansen hits a 3 out of the corner, and it was on after that. And we cut it from 15 to, I believe, 5 or 3. And then they brought the Black Cat back, and he scored 11 of our last 13 points. And we went on to win the game. And during that time, he's bringing Jordan, brought in Horace Grant, brought back John Paxson. And he left me out there the entire fourth quarter along with Scottie Pippen and the rest of those cats I just named. And that gave me so much confidence that I had come from such, trying out for the last spot on a squad to being out there and bringing the Bulls their second championship. I had an epiphany that at that point I could play as long as I wanted to, as long as my body allowed me to. There's nobody that could stop me, nothing that could stop me from playing and achieving my goals of playing longer than all those guys on that list. That's for sure.
And you have to, clearly, we talk about the situation and the trauma with, your mother and your father, and the situation we talked about with Coach Smith. And now what are you thinking as you start to get into the NBA? Because, you mentioned it. Hey, I'll show him, like to your father. And I think we always have that, and that can be almost helpful to our development, right? Like, but it's also, the most painful thing in the world. What were you thinking as you start to matriculate in the NBA and moments like this?
Well, it gives you confidence, right? Like that was the biggest thing. That was the epiphany that I took away from that moment that literally propelled me and gave me that confidence that I could do it and I can overcome anything that life throws at me on or off the damn court. So that was huge. The other great thing of going to a team as talented as that Bulls at that period that were right on that cusp, like they hadn't gotten past the Pistons before I got there, so they were hell bent on beating the Pistons and winning and getting home court advantage throughout the Eastern Conference, so they didn't have to go on the road to play Game 7 where they had gotten beat by the Pistons 3 years in a row. So I was with pros that were dedicated, and they taught me not how to be a professional basketball player so much, but how to be a professional in life and how to attack everything that you did from a professional manner. And I'm 100% grateful for the guys like John Paxson, Craig Hodges, Michael Jordan, and Bill Cartwright, because those were the vets on that team. And those lessons that I learned, both some verbal, some not, communicated by example, certainly that helped my career. And some of those cats that I had mentioned, the NBA was really kind of an expansion era right there. So there was 4 new teams in 2 seasons. And some of those guys that were the higher draft choices, they might have gone to one of those teams that, they had players that were pros, but they didn't have great players that were really dedicated in losing situations and probably didn't get those types of examples and those lessons that I just talked about. And their careers weren't as long or as fruitful as it had been if they had been in my shoes in Chicago. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, you take complete advantage of the opportunity. And you mentioned you're kind of helping young or those guys are helping you, a young man, become a professional. Now we fast forward, right? Now you're on the other side of the coin towards the end of your career, and everybody knew you as a glue guy on the floor and off the floor. I mean, you were available to really help people through stuff, and whether it was on the floor or off the floor. Did you take great pride in that role?
100%. That's the greatest thing about, well, not only sports, but especially team sports, when you have an opportunity to pass the knowledge that you have learned on to younger guys. I like to think that I did a good job of that here with my time in Phoenix when I had a young Joe Johnson, Amari Stoudemire, and Sean Marion. If I was Nazir Muhammad in Philadelphia, even Anderson Varejao, we kind of reconnected, and he thanks me for the time that I was with him during his early development in the league. And that means a lot to have somebody do that who, he went on to play 15, 16 years in the NBA, to somebody to come back and say that they had a big influence early on in their career. It means a lot. And I think that's what nobody ever came to see Scott Williams play. And I got the championships, and everyone said, well, yeah, we rode George's coattails to that. But giving back to the game to the younger players is huge. And to have guys like Casey Jacobson, just to say things like that to you long after they're done and have no reason to do it whatsoever, because you saw them at a Suns alumni event, it's a pretty damn cool thing.
How do you kind of rein those guys in? I mean, you're in the twilight of your career. We're talking like 2003, 2004, 2005. And, how do you set an example for these guys? Because the nature of the beast, for all of us as we're young men, is to go out run the streets a little bit, have fun. These guys, you have so much money. How do you kind of set an example for them and make sure these messages don't fall on deaf ears? Because I would imagine a lot of the ears were deaf. I mean, mine would have been.
Well, it's about establishing connections with the guys. That's the biggest thing, right? Like everybody's got their things that they love to do off the court. It was tractor trailers. Sometimes it was just going out and breaking bread, or I hate to say it, but hitting the occasional men's club afterwards. But doing it with the young guys and establishing that relationship with them. But the next day in practice going, okay, hey, listen, we went out, we had us a time in Atlanta, but now we're going to Philadelphia and we got practice when we land. Everybody lace them up tight because we're going to get after it because we got to get this game against the Sixers, right? Like that's what it takes. And I remember being on that plane to this day. I was hurting. Those kids, they put a hurting on this old man when we were out running on the streets to the early mornings and riding around, and like tractor got a limo this size of a school bus, and I was face down on the plane letting it cross the aisle. But when it was time to practice, we went straight to the arena. You got to put it on and you got to bring it. You got to be the best player out there. You can't let what you did the night before affect you when you have to step on the court and you have to perform, whether that's a film session, that's weight training, extra conditioning, practice, or the game. Those were the lessons that I wanted to try to teach those guys, that you have to be a pro, because no matter how talented you are, people and teams and coaches will not put up with no nonsense. They will always find somebody younger, better, and cheaper to try to replace you. So don't give them any extra motivation to do that.
We talk about some of the tough parts about writing the book and some of the tougher parts in the book. What were some of your favorite parts of the book to write?
I think the experiences that I had with my teammate, talking to a young Michael Redd in Milwaukee, he's playing behind, not only an all-star, but a Hall of Famer, and in reality, he's a sophomore coming out of Ohio State. And he's not getting any opportunities to play. And even if they are, they're real short, and we ain't running the damn plays for him. Trying to keep him motivated and to tell him some hard truths about his game and his body. Like, Michael, you're pudgy. Like, you got to get in better shape so you can chase guys like Reggie Miller around these screens, right? So you'll have not only the ability to, play good defense and be there with them, but now you got enough energy left offensively to be able to do the thing that you do best, and that's score that basketball. And a lot of guys, when they're young, they don't want to hear that. They're like, screw you, calling me fat. Well, yeah, you shouldn't be out of shape, out of overweight. Like, you got to get slimmer. You got to get more athletic. You got to work on the things to help your foot speed, and that means putting in extra work. And I think sometimes the younger players don't always want to hear the hard truth. But if you've established a connection with them, it gives you the credibility to be able to talk to them like a man. And I didn't do that in a locker room full of guys. That's a one-on-one conversation you have with somebody. Never try to embarrass a teammate.
Well, it's what's funny, and even on like lower levels, I don't want to say lower levels, but even in situations like me, like if I have a situation, I can call somebody out in front of a bunch of people, and it's almost easier. Like, and then you just kind of ride off into the sunset, like, okay, but to grab somebody one-on-one, to look them in the eyes, man-to-man, or whatever, and tell them what's bothering you, that's hard. And that's, like, esteemable. To do that, it elevates the whole relationship. It elevates you as the person who needs to have the talk with them, and hopefully the opportunity is there to elevate them as well.
Oh, I agree, Pete. I mean, you nailed it. It's leadership, right? Like, maybe I'm not the star player on the team, but I think every veteran has a leadership role to play. I just like finding one of the young guys that I made a connection with. I ain't trying to talk to everybody. That's hard to do, but to have a group setting, organizing dinners out on the road in Portland, in Los Angeles, and having good buy-in where you're getting 80% of the guys show up, that helps. When I was here in Phoenix, for instance, it's Sean Marion and Penny Hardaway. We had Joe Johnson. We had Sean Marion. We were predicted to finish second to last in the league. There was no team chemistry before I got here. I got these guys to like one another. We did stuff off the court. All of a sudden, we get the eighth spot in the playoffs. We take 2 games from the eventual champion San Antonio Spurs. Overachieving in sports is the greatest feeling, even if you don't win a championship. And I believe that I was an overachiever for my entire career in the NBA.
So down the stretch in the NBA, you're on some great teams, by the way. I want to talk about your experience. I'll let you out of here in a little bit. I'll talk about your experience with the Bucks. You were, as a Sixers fan, you get suspended for Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. That game was so close. If you end up playing in that game, you had a major role for that Bucks team. If you play in that game, you probably go to the championship and beat the Sixers. I mean, I think it was a 1-basket game on the road in Philly. So walk me through as a player, because people talk about this Draymond, or people know what he's thinking. You weren't like that, but you were suspended for a huge game. What's it like to be a player going through that? And how did it happen? I guess we'll start there. How did it happen?
You just opened up a wound that's never healed. And that happened in 2001. For all that I am, that my mama raised me to be, getting back to the NBA Finals was the most important thing to me to do as a player. To the success that I was able to experience, not once, not twice, but my first 3 damn years in the league. We used to ride around my bike in Chicago up to Wrigley Field in the summertime, and to have people yell out, "Hey, champ," or you go into a bar and you pay for nothing here. Everything's free. To have that feeling of being on top, it's something that you just can't recreate. There's no drug, there's no drink, there's no sex, there's no money, no car, no clothes, nothing you can buy that replaces that feeling or even comes close to, for that matter. And so when we were playing the Sixers, a team that I had just been traded from a couple of years prior, they stood in the way of what I wanted again, that feeling that I wanted again. And I had picked up 2 quick fouls in games 4 and 5 for what I will tell you to this day. Now, listen, I'm the all-time ACC fouls leader. And swear I didn't commit half of them. But I'm telling you to this day that I did not make those fouls in games 4 and games 5 after the way Tyronn Hill. Tyronn Hill, think he was banging on me, and Dikembe Mutombo, who hadn't, by the way, gotten his first foul to the second half of game 4, which he was a walking foul out there. But anyway, I was determined that I'm not going out with that. Next foul I get, I'm going to earn. And so Allen Iverson in game 6, he comes flying past Sam Cassell. No shocker there. Sam couldn't stay in front of an office chair with wheels on it. But the little sucker came flying in there, and I looked at this as my opportunity to send a message not only to the Sixers and to my team, but the NBA, not putting up with these ticky-tack fouls that I would get, breathing on him every time he came to the lane. So I with my forearm at about his shoulder level, cracked him real good, real nicely. And I don't know if his feet came off the ground, but he flew into Irvin Johnson and then tumbled down like a bag of bricks. And they hit me with a flagrant 1 foul, which at the time wasn't that big a deal under the rules. You were allowed 4 points. So basically a flagrant 1 was 1 point, flagrant 2 was 2 points. And you didn't get suspended from a game until you hit 4 points. Well, I had gotten a foul in the first 5-game series against the Orlando Magic for cracking Tracy McGrady, and sent him flying underneath the first row of chairs. And then, I can't remember who it was for Charlotte, but I told Sam Cassell, you want to run side pick and roll, because he gave me a cheap shot in the game before. And I said, you run him over on the side. I'm going to come over and set the screen. Well, I never stopped. And boom, he goes underneath the first row of seats too. Now, remember, I'm a 90s kid, right? It's 2001. So I've laid a couple guys out now. So after the game, which I was killing in game 6, I had 10 of our first 14 points, and I wasn't a scorer. But after the game, as I'm getting on the plane to fly to Philadelphia for game 7, Ernie Grunfeld calls me down the steps off the plane and says, the league offices have upgraded your flagrant 1 foul to a flagrant 2 foul, which put me at the 4-point total, and I was going to be suspended from game 7. And to this day, it was the most painful and hurtful thing that I had ever experienced in the NBA, because I have a couple suits rather that have never wet a jock at the NBA level to experience what we go through to get to that point, to play in a game 7, a freaking game 7. Are you kidding me? When I was an integral part of our squad, a starter, and I'm coming off a damn good game too. So I felt like I was, finally getting past that trying too hard against my former team and settling into the series. It was going to have an impact on game 7. He really dealt me and the Bucks franchise a bad beat down.
Dude, so, I remember.
Yeah, we were close, but Darvin Ham, God bless him, I was playing a lot better basketball at the time than he was.
Well, there was all this conspiracy talk, right? That David Stern wants Allen Iverson. There was all of that stuff,
Well, yeah, because they had Allen Iverson was the MVP.
Yeah.
Dikembe Mutombo was the Defensive Player of the Year. Aaron McKee was the
6th man.
Larry
Brown, Coach of the Year.
And Larry Brown, who I think he might have made a call to the league as well. Being a former Carolina guy, he can, take a long walk off a short pier, in my opinion. Got me suspended from that game, but he was Coach of the Year that year as well. And listen, the NBA, they had done well post Jordan in '98, but not that damn good. The ratings weren't as good as they would have wanted them to be. So a small market team like Milwaukee, without the star power, going up against Shaq and Kobe and the Lakers, I just think they thought we would get smashed and it wasn't going to be a good series. And I think I honestly believe, the fact that we had a number of things go against us as far as the calls go, free throws, disparity, again, that big suspension, it just all adds up to we were playing with a shorter deck than the Sixers.
So right now you're playing with a full deck, right? I as far as I'm concerned, no, really, I think you're moving and grooving out there in the Phoenix area. What is next for you? First of all, the book is awesome, Through the Fire. Where can people get the book, by the way? Amazon?
Yeah. Well, I'll hold it up because that's the cover. If you go to Amazon.com, and if you can't remember Through the Fire,
I'll put a link on this podcast.
Yeah, put in Scott Williams' book, and it pops right up. But Amazon.com. We got it in paperback and hardcover. It's also available as well. You can get it on your tablet. Also, you can also for my loyal Barnes and Noble people. I didn't know that people were still loyal to Barnes and Noble. You can also get it paperback at Barnes and Noble as well.
All right, let me ask you a question. I'm going to put you on the spot. Are we going to do an audio book?
Well, that's what everybody kept asking me, and I have not done it just yet. Everyone said I should voice it over. I don't know if I sound good enough to do my own voiceover on my own audio book, but there's a possibility that might be coming down the pike.
Yeah, all right. You let me know if you need any help making that happen. Because I'm telling you, dude, this is a great book, and the more and more people can get a hold of it and read it, and the inspiration that comes from it. Because to me, dude, there are two things that's a sweet spot for me. Pro sports and trauma, and how people find their ways through, the trauma and still maintain this level of success that is just, it's unbelievable. The two things have always really, some stuff that's just really interests me, and that's one of the things. And I think this book is an amazing illustration of, the life behind the curtain of a pro athlete,
Thanks, Pete. And I think that one of the reasons I call it Through the Fire is that I didn't want what my father did to my mother to change the child that my mother raised. And then what Coach Smith took from a young adult and turned me into a man. I never wanted that to change for her legacy and his. And I've shown you the cover twice, but what's on the back is a picture of my mother and Coach Smith and how much that they meant to me. I thought that they should be also on the jacket. So living my life in a way where I get to capitalize on what I majored in school in broadcasting, to be able to do it at the pro level for Cleveland, Milwaukee, and Phoenix. Now having done it for 9 years at Grand Canyon University, Lopes Up, just won their first ever NCAA championship game. Proud of what Bryce Drew, his brother there in Waco, what Bryce was able to do this year with that program. He's taken them to the big dance now, 3 of his first 4 years. So to see that growth and that maturation process has really been rewarding. I love the spirit of the college game, and we'll see. I'm having fun.
I know we'll see. We're going to see a lot more of this guy on ESPN.
That was exciting. That, with the chemistry that we developed, and you guys welcomed me. It led to 2 more ESPN broadcasts. So I love kind of where things are right now as far as my career goes, and we'll just see. I just turned 56, and we'll see where the future has left for me.
You look good to me, man. You look like you're 36. Scott, man, I appreciate the time. I got to roll. They're going to throw me out of this room. But
all right,
when
people,
this goes
thank
up,
you so much for the time and having me on and letting me share a little of my story.
Dude, I mean, the fact that I could be a conduit to this thing getting out there is amazing. I'm going to send you a link to this podcast when it comes up. And if you want, I'll send you just the video and stuff so you can have it if you ever want to promote on your own or anything like that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, you're the man, Scott. I really appreciate you, dude. Lindsay, can you describe the state of the union of women's college basketball right now?
Well, I think that the biggest thing is we have star power and people know individual names, right? And it's not just Caitlin Clark. She's number one, but people know Angel Reese. People know Paige Beckers, people know Juju Watkins, and that is huge. All I do is watch basketball, and I don't think outside of Zach Edey I can name 5 men's players. And I think a lot of people are in that position. I think that worldwide we're seeing a rise of women's sports and investment in women's sports, and a lot of people realizing that, we should spend money on women's sports, not because it's the right thing to do, but because if we invest money, they can make us money. And that's huge, right? That's what people care about, is the bottom line. And I think that on the women's side, one thing I've noticed a lot throughout the tournament is these players they just have so much joy and passion. And I wonder sometimes if it's because they're so happy that suddenly everyone cares about their sport. Is that why we're seeing what we're seeing? And so that makes them want to play harder and faster and put on even a better show. I do think too that we have a lot of kids who want to put on a good show, and that matters. They understand that the eyeballs are on them and they're stepping up. So for me, as someone who's loved women's basketball since I was 7, this is a really, really cool time for everyone else to recognize these girls got some game.
Well, they do. And here's one thing I want to throw at you. Bob Ryan, obviously legendary Boston writer, he tweeted last night, very complimentary on the state of the women's game, but he says, when you think about Dawn Staley and Lisa Leslie, he said these incredible players have been around for a very long time. Incredible women's basketball, it's no stranger, I guess, to society. What do you take from that comment?
Yeah, that's so true, right? I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I was talking about this with Lindsay Gottlieb from USC. Arike Agumbawale hit 2 buzzer beaters in the NCAA Final Four to have Notre Dame win its most recent title, right? So there have always been a lot of people that can play. But the difference is that they're putting it on channels that people have access to. They're doing it at times people have access to. To have women's games on ABC, you just cannot overstate the value of that. the number of casual people who are tuning in, watch it, and then they're like, oh, I think I want to watch this more. Or maybe you tune in to watch Caitlin Clark and you see Flau'jae Johnson from LSU. And then you want to watch her when she plays again against someone from South Carolina. And then you're like, wait, I like Camila Cardozo. Like, I think that's a big, big part of it. But for so long, so many women's games were put on, ESPN News. Who can find that channel? And no offense to them, but put on or online only, and streaming is great and it's the future, but having it be on a major cable network that everyone knows, I mean, having to be on ESPN versus ESPN2, those things matter. People have access to them. I think all the time about Kelsey Plum, who plays in the WNBA, was saying something a couple months ago about, when her mom wants to watch a WNBA game, she has to jump through like 10 hoops. And they've won back-to-back WNBA titles, right, with the Las Vegas Aces. But we can just turn on the TV and, let's just go to ABC because I want to watch some great sitcom, because I want to watch Abbott Elementary, But, look, there's a women's basketball game on. Like, that matters.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. I call games, right, for men's basketball and women's too sometimes. But I was, and I do it for ESPN, but I was the most excited I was all year long. Of course, you get revved up to actually call a game yourself. But as far as a fan, I was excited all day yesterday for last night. I mean, that's the most excited I've been maybe all basketball season for a game. And I think the hardest part about the game was saying goodbye to Angel Reese and Kim Mulkey as just complete characters that generate a lot of interest. I want to ask you about,
no question.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Angel Reese. I know we don't have too much time, so I won't keep you for much longer. Angel Reese, why wouldn't she come back?
Well, I mean, so here's one thing you have to remember about most women athletes. Most women's athletes have their degree in 3 or 3.5 years because they all take summer school. So if you're like over school, which I think a lot of people can be, I would have been at that point. Also, she's going to make money as a pro. Her endorsement deals are going to follow her. I think that of all the people who could come back, it makes the most sense for her because I think that with her body in the pros, it would be really beneficial to her to have more of a perimeter skill set and specifically be able to shoot from the perimeter. She's an excellent facilitator, a better ball handler than a lot of people realize. But if she came back and said, I'm only going to play on the perimeter, that could really help her game. But I think also sometimes you're just kind of done with college. You've been around for a while, you feel older than everyone, and you're ready for the next chapter. So she hasn't declared yet, but I fully expect her to. I suppose she could prove us all wrong, but I definitely think she's going to the W.
What about Caitlin Clark? Are we all I'll just speak for myself, my experience. Am I a prisoner of the moment with how captivated I am with her as a player? Is she that good?
I mean, first of all, if you are a prisoner of the moment, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, it's a pretty good person to be in watching her. Look, she's going to be, whenever she's done playing at this rate, I said to someone today, like, I should probably just pick Iowa to win the national championship because every time I pick against them, they prove me wrong. So what do I know even? She's going to wind up being, when she's done, the most complete offensive player we've ever seen at the women's collegiate level. I don't think she's the best all-around women's player of all time. That distinction goes to Cheryl Miller, who played at USC in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that a big part of Caitlin, like, people don't appreciate Caitlin if Steph Curry doesn't come along first. Steph Curry changed the way that people looked at basketball. He proved that you don't just have to dunk for it to be exciting, that threes are exciting, that deep threes are exciting, that getting out in transition and hitting a three is exciting. And Caitlin does that. And, I loved Flau'jae Johnson saying the other day that when she was guarding her last year in the title game, Caitlin crossed half court and Flau'jae thought, oh, she's not going to pull up from here. And then Caitlin did, and she made it. And Flau'jae was like, oh, my God, I better guard her sooner. And I think a lot of people think that when they watch her, like, she's not actually going to do this. Even if you've watched her before. And, you were saying like you were so excited for that game yesterday. To me, the best thing about the LSU Iowa game is they delivered. I mean, there were so many eyeballs, and those kids stepped up. They hit huge shots. It was tied at halftime. Like, it was such a good game. I was hearing from other friends who work in, so like a friend of mine who works in MLS was telling me, like, I'm so envious right now that this game got so much hype and it's living up to it.
Yes.
So Caitlin is a really big part of that. I also think that, she loves to talk trash, and she's cocky, and she whines at the officials, and people love that. She has a lot of personality, and she doesn't feel like she has to hide it. She's also an awesome person, the way she stays after games. She sends autographs for hours. Tons of little kids love her, boys and girls, and want to be like her, and she gives back to them. Like, I think that it's all you're not the only one who's captivated. We were talking the other day in the press room because Jason Sudeikis, obviously Ted Lasso, was at the game last night, and Alexa Philippou from ESPN goes, "Why is Jason Sudeikis there?" And I said, "He loves Caitlin Clark."
Yeah.
And Kevin Pelton, also from ESPN, goes, "Stars, they're just like us." And I think that's a great
Us Weekly shout out.
way to put it.
Yeah. No, I did Iowa's first round NIT game for ESPN, and she was there, and we were like, hey, like, it was my idea. Our producer was like, do you think she'll talk? And they were like, genuinely, she won't. And not because she doesn't want to talk to the media. She doesn't want to take away from this game at all. It's a men's game. She's here. She's supporting the guys, and that's just how it is. And I was told by a couple people that's exactly who she is, which is like just super cool to know. All right, last question for you. I'll let you out of here on this. Who, or should I say, what do we not know about women's college basketball and the Final Four that we will know after this weekend? We have our stars, right? And it's so cool to say that, but we have stars. You got Paige Beckers, you got Gino, you have Dawn Staley, you have Caitlin Clark, you have Iowa. Was there something we will learn about this Final Four that we don't know yet?
Well, I think if you don't know Isaiah James from North Carolina State, you better learn quick, specifically if you're guarding her, because that girl walks in the gym and she's ready to shoot. I think the other thing that maybe we'll know or we'll have a great debate about is, Gino said after UConn's second round win over Syracuse, Paige is the best player in America. And there were a lot of people who didn't take that very well, specifically people that live in Iowa City. So depending on what happens in that game, I mean, if Paige wins, is she the best player in America? If Iowa wins, is Caitlin? I think that we'll have a really fun debate about that. And then I think, too, that with South Carolina, everyone knows Dawn Staley, but, Dawn doesn't, she's not on the floor anymore. I very much believe she could still guard a lot of these good players. But I think that with South Carolina, Raven Johnson, Raven's the player that went viral last year. Caitlin waved her off like, oh, I don't got to worry about her. I don't need to guard her. And that girl has become a knockdown shooter. So I think that that's what we're going to learn. And what I'm curious to see is if Iowa figures out a way to beat UConn and let's say we get an Iowa-South Carolina rematch, is that does that draw better than the men's final? I don't know. The UConn men are just destroying everyone. I don't think they're very fun to watch.
It isn't.
So I think that we're in for some great games. And to me, it's just really exciting that so many people are tuning in. And I think the biggest thing is you can tune in, you can watch this, and yeah, Caitlin's going to leave, but there are players who are going to come back next year that you're going to be able to see. And so hopefully that just generates a lot of interest in the off season.
No, I think this is a tidal wave, and I think we're all going to continue to ride it. Lindsay, you do an awesome job. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. It means a lot. So enjoy the Final Four, and you do great work.
Awesome. Well, I'm always happy to hear someone's reading besides my parents. So
you got it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm in. All right, that wraps up this episode of the Pete Sousa Podcast on the Rogue Media Sports Network. We're going to continue to roll on here. We appreciate you being patient with us as we get our production stuff in line. Right, Zach? Yes, sir. I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, no, I think we're still, I feel like each week we're getting better. I truly believe that.
I do too. I mean, we got a whole studio and stuff. It's going to blow you guys away. Mm-hmm. We're scratching the surface. right?
Yes,
right,
sir.
Zach?
Yes, sir. We're they aren't ready for what I'm telling you. Each week, I feel like it's one of those like Where's Waldo books of you've noticed something. I'm like, oh, I see that. All right, and it's going to get better and better each and every week.
Yeah. Well, we look to scratching that itch. We look forward to scratching the itch again next week. This could become daily at some point. All right. How about that? We'll talk to you later.
We are Rogue Media Sports.